I'm very happy to join again, Johannes, for this time a chat on business, on how to manage a successful indie team and how to manage a studio that has clearly found the recipe for successful indie games. Johannes, no?
Thank you
Thanks
for
for
having
joining.
me.
That's a great help. So Johannes, let me start with a question that I kind of suggested it in the first panel as well. Why why was it only your third, let's say, big project self-published? Why did you choose to have publishers along with you, knowing that your games can be successful and that you already have um, quite a presence in the game development world?
To be fair, when we worked with the publishers on Shadow Tactics and Desperados 3, we didn't know for sure that these games would be successful. So it actually, like in the traditional publishing model, they took the risk. The first publisher was Dedelic, and then it was THQ Nordic. And we just believed in the project, obviously. When we made Desperados 3, we knew that Shadow Tactics was successful, but we didn't have the money to invest. Like, let's say we could have licensed the Desperados IP or something. That wasn't possible. But yeah, it was a long journey, and it was actually only possible to self-publish now with the third real-time tactics game we are making, because the two games before, someone else took the risk and believed in us and believed in the vision we had. So we are thankful for that. It was a long
I
way to
think that's
get there.
relevant. I think that's relevant. I think also on a psychological level, to be like, okay, so these great publishers are interested in our game and believe in this game. I guess your optimism level was was higher because of that. However, I have to say that looking through some recent launches, also, I've seen a lot of big publishers that have published some pretty cool games. Why not, by great developers that weren't successful? So I believe that at this point, somehow, getting the vouch of a publisher and getting a publisher as a partner, even a bigger one, right, is not necessarily a measure of success anymore, right? I feel that at this point it's hit and miss, even if you self-publish or not. So how do you think, in terms of the relationship that you had with your publishers, how do you think you can make sure as a developer that the publisher actually puts their time and effort and real resources into making sure that this game is successful? Because probably they don't care as much about your game as you do. They have many games to care about.
Yeah, I think they care about all the projects, but of course they don't only have one project like many developers. So it's just part
Yeah,
of the nature behind the business that this has to be
yeah,
different. I think honestly it helps to have a project with a big budget. So one project that if it fails actually hurts the publisher. So of course that drives attention to your project and makes sure that they are investing everything they can to make it a success. I also want to say that it really depends on the partner.
good
There are
point.
many very successful publishers out there that are only signing games that they actually really want to invest time on. And sometimes things go wrong simply because, for example, the producer at the publisher leaves the company for whatever reason. You don't always have control over that. And then there's a new producer assigned to your project, and maybe they don't really get it, or they have to take their time to get to know the new project they have. So I think you have to be a little bit forgiving sometimes, actually. It's not an easy business, but what I find the most important in terms of communication with publishers and making sure that they like you, and that means that they will be invested, is to not surprise them. Basically,
Mm.
like, don't have a milestone, a beta milestone, and then on the day you should deliver that milestone, write them an email. Whoops, we know that before you have to send the milestone. So yeah, no surprises. That really helps with the communication part.
I think that totally makes sense. Going into self-publishing from publishing, I was wondering because there probably are a lot of teams that at one point they're going to transition from working with a publisher to doing self-publishing. How different is the entire even development process and the creative process now for you guys? Knowing that you're not working with a publisher, so you're not scared of hard milestones and hard deadlines and so on. Also in terms of creative liberties, how is this different, and most importantly, what are the flags, the red flags that a studio should look into while transitioning to self-publishing?
Yeah, it is very motivating, but it's also very hard because you have to do everything on your own,
Yeah.
which is cool, but also bad, because it's a lot of work. First of all, I would suggest that you should be even more afraid of all those milestones and hard deadlines, because if you do self-publishing, it most likely means that you are much more invested with your own funds. So the risk is even higher compared to a traditional publishing model where that publisher might have a slack budget or something, like they have reserves. You, as a self-publishing company, maybe you don't have them. So we worked on having milestones in place. We worked on having a green light process for these milestones in place. And it's weird because this time we can't say, oh, the publisher didn't want to greenlight this, we have to fix it. And that, of course, kind of created pressure, obviously, but it also meant we had to fix stuff. This time we have to do it ourselves, and it's a completely
Yeah.
new way of interacting with the team. And I have to be the bad guy sometimes, and that's kind of new. It's also not that easy. And I understand that the first idea is, yeah, no more milestones. Now we can just do whatever we want. But actually, that usually means that it's a bad choice for project management and you won't finish your game with the given budget you have. In terms of creative freedom, I got to say that the biggest change is that we are building a new IP and we will completely own it. But other than that, for the previous projects we worked with traditional publishers, they gave us a lot of creative freedom. It sometimes was even part of the contract that they don't have any creative say over our game. So it's possible to have that without self-publishing. And we really enjoyed working on these games and doing what we wanted. And then, of course, with Desperados being an external IP, there was feedback, but that's to be expected. We didn't build that IP. So,
Obviously,
um,
obviously, because it was, yeah, it was an IP. I mean, that's a whole different ball game.
yeah.
And I think very hard. I think very hard to be creative and have creative freedom in the constraints of an IP that has already existed. I think you've done a great job. So congrats with the cards on the table being quite tough. If we
Thank you.
went from publishing to self-publishing, now I would like to go from failures to successes, to hear what you've learned from the failures that you guys have encountered. Because I read an article that an interview that you had in Games Industry Biz, I think, and you once mentioned that although your first games were winning awards, they were not successful financially. Why do you think this is the case? Because I think that especially in industry like ours here in Eastern Europe, there's a lot of indie studios that at this point are creating games, most probably, and most of them not necessarily being great successes financially, but the studios are entering different competitions, are going to different conferences, they're winning awards, and in a way, as you said, in terms of the publisher vouching on you, in a way, these awards, they make them feel that, okay, this game has potential to actually make money. uh, is that the case though?
I think in a way it is. Obviously it depends on the award. The tougher it is to win, the better it
The
shows the
chances.
potential of the project. Um, with our games, like our first game was called Da Vinci, and it was a game that won the Apple Design Award, which was a great door opener. A lot of companies we worked with had a lot of respect for that, and it opened a lot of doors. But it didn't make a lot of money. So why was that? I would say a game where you control the weather to kind of guide a hot air balloon through the world is not the best sell. Because who likes a hot air balloon? Maybe if the hot air balloon was at that time a cute character, like from Cut the Rope or something, maybe that would have worked much better. So I think
Yeah.
we didn't really nail the target audience or something. What we did nail was the game design, and that was why we won the award and why people respected us. And um, it's kind of the same with The Last Tinker, which was the very first big game. Um, there was no clear vision for who the target audience was. We kind of
Oh, this
thought
is so
about,
important. This is so
yes, it
important. I
is
mean,
so
I think this
important.
is, please say it again, because I think this is so relevant for indie studios. You know,
Yes,
they're doing their passion projects. They're bringing everything they have in the creative process. Do they have a market for it? I mean, always ask yourselves, do you have a market for it? It's beautiful,
yeah,
it's greatly done, it's amazing, but will actually other people play it? I
yeah.
think it's
So with The
incredibly
Last
important.
Tinker, we tried to make a platformer, but we wanted to make it more accessible, which meant
Hmm.
we removed the jump button from, let's say, Banjo-Kazooie or Ratchet and Clank. There's no jump button anymore, but the movement works more like an Assassin's Creed or Uncharted, where you just run and the character jumps to the correct thing automatically.
Hmm.
And then it's more about timing than precision. But who's the target audience for that? We wanted to broaden the target audience, but by doing that, we didn't have a target audience anymore. If you look at other platformers that were released after The Last Tinker, like Ukulele or like A Hat in Time, I think they were
Hmm.
much more successful because they understood, well, we don't want to appeal to everyone, but to those diehard fans from back in the days on N64, collectathons, rare games. And I think being very clear, usually if you make a game and you say, well, basically everyone can play it, young people, old people, male, woman, you know, then you have a problem. The clearer you
Yeah,
are,
agreed.
the more focus you have, the better.
Agreed. And actually, this shows in our industry as well. It shows, for example, with the great success Kill House had. Kill House obviously knew that their game is not going to be for everyone, right? That the Door Kickers franchise is not going to be for everyone, but they knew exactly the target and they catered to that target. And I think that's very, very relevant and one of the reasons of their success. I Going a bit further in terms of not necessarily why it failed, but the breaking point of you guys having two or three games that failed, and you're sitting there in your studio and be like, okay, so what's next? Because there are a lot of companies now in also listening, but in Eastern Europe and everywhere, actually, a lot of indie studios that are after a first or second failure, and they sit around the table and be like, so do we go on or not? Do we go and become an employee at a bigger studio? What are we going to do? How did you guys decide that? So where was where was your breaking point, and how did you decide to move forward? What were the I don't know, the reasons behind it?
I think it's tough to say. We just wanted to make games, and we wanted to make a successful one. So when The Last Tinker didn't work as well as we hoped for, that was very sad for the whole team. And then basically we worked on new pitches, so it was all about what will be the next game. And when we worked on the Shadow Tactics pitch, it basically was, let's do the original Commandos type of game with ninjas. That was the pitch. And it clicked very quickly, because Dark Souls was very, very successful at the time. Difficult games were successful at the time, and they continue to be very successful. I did like Google Alerts research where it showed that words like samurai and ninja, they were trending upwards. People were interested in that kind of culture. Maybe I know
Important, this
that.
is this is an important line. So check out the trends, make sure that you check out the
Yes.
trends before you work on something, and also make sure that if you're looking at the trends now, you're not delivering the game 4 years later, because that's gonna be a hard
Yeah,
sell.
that's tough. That is very tough to make. Yeah. Well, I think we'll get on that back later, like being focused and actually shipping a game. It's stupid stuff, like you see all the Lego here. Um, Back in the day when we pitched Shadow Tactics, Lego released their data, and the Ninjago series is their most successful line, or was at that time at least. So we saw, well, the topic is interesting. It's a perfect fit to the gameplay. Like Commandos, it was based in World War II, where you usually shoot around and do loud stuff and not sneak that much. You don't have that much stealth as a first thought in your head when you think about war. But with Ninja, it was exactly what you do in the game. You sneak around, you have like 1, 2, 3, maybe 5 characters. They take out 100 enemies, and no one understands what has happened. Everyone's gone. Mission goal
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
clicked with Dedelic, and that was just enough motivation to go forward.
Agreed. So let's move on from failures, as I hope all the studios listening will, and go towards successes and the reasons why you guys were successful. So, what do you think set you apart from other indies that did not make it as big as you guys did? So, what were the
First of
competitive
all,
advantages?
yeah, I mean, I don't think every indie wants to get big. I think an indie should try to be successful in terms of making money and then sustaining itself. I think there are 2 things we are really, or 3 things we are really good at. First is quality. We can really deliver high quality games. With Last Tinker, I mean, there are flaws within the games, but looking at our very small team and what we achieved and how tough it is to do a 3D action adventure, and all the tech behind that, I think we really nailed it for what we could achieve. Then I think we're really good at building a team. We have basically no fluctuation, very, very little. We are very consistent with our hires. We grew very slowly. We only hired the best people we found, and we still like each other. So I think the team behind the games is very important. And then, last but not least, being focused and actually finishing the game. I know a lot of indies are trying to make money by doing contract work or work for hire projects, and then save a little bit of money and then work 1 or 2 months on their passion project and then go back to doing something that they don't actually want to do. And that's
Yeah,
something we never did. It's a privilege that we didn't have to do it, but we also made we created a situation. We fought for a situation where we could have that privilege. So it was our own achievement, and I think it's very important to focus on what you want to do, why you did that startup, why did you found the company, Why are you investing all that time, that stress? Why are you receiving such a small salary at the beginning? Is it worth it? And I think it's personally only worth it if you really focus on what you want to do and get it done, and then realize you have to release maybe 5 or 10 games to get successful. So you have to have a long-term plan instead of, it's a marathon and not a sprint. It's not about finishing one game and then being successful. But if you are too much on different projects that are not helping with the passion project, I know it's hard, but it can be done, and I want to.
I don't know which one of us got blocked here. I don't know which one of us did. Okay, so I hope it was me and not you, and we could hear what you said. I think you mentioned your team and the way that it grew organically. Let's talk numbers a bit. Let's talk specifics. So, how big was your team at the beginning? How organically did it grow, and how big are you now?
We started with 6 people on the payroll in 2012, and we are now 36, so quite a bit more. I remember we didn't want to grow beyond 10, then we didn't want to grow beyond 15, and it was never about having a large company. It was always
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
about, well, someone needs help with this job, so we need to hire someone to help them. Because in the startup, one person usually has a lot of jobs at the same time,
Yeah.
and at some point that's just too much to tackle for eternity. You have to kind of reduce the stress maybe a bit, or make sure that people can focus on the most important tasks more instead of trying to do everything. So this is how we grew.
But that's important what you just said, because I think sometimes managing small teams is actually harder than managing bigger teams, especially when you talk about this complex creative products, like games are. So how did you manage in terms of so there was at one point a guy that was doing three different things, then they took on three other people, they have to manage them. Not a lot of people who are game developers and know their job as a game developer also know how to manage teams. So how can you make that jump from doing everything yourself to managing the people that are doing it for you?
I think that's very hard, and there's no specific answer. Maybe you can get help from other people who are already doing it and how they got there, like from other studios, or maybe at the networking event of the association or something. So talking to other founders often helps with that. Of course, maybe you can find a consultant for stuff like that. Maybe you just are a natural talent with people and are good at managing them on the level where the company is maybe 10 and to 15 people. And then once it grows, there will be new challenges at all times. So there's no perfect answer on how to do it. But I think it's crucial, even before being able to manage other people, you should be able to let go of different tasks and responsibilities, because if you hire someone, they will do it in a different way than you did it. And
Yeah.
that's not easy to accept always. Sometimes, they do it better. Sometimes maybe they do it different. Maybe sometimes they do it in a little bit worse way. Maybe it's only 90% of what it could have been, but it means you had more time to do the stuff that only you can do. And I think that's very important to focus on the tasks that only you can tackle. So for me, it means I'm now only focusing on business development and the team and kind of doing the contracts and the boring stuff. When I started, I was a programmer and worked on the last Tinker a lot on the code, but I'm not
Wasn't it
doing that
hard though?
anymore.
Wasn't it hard
Yes,
to let go of that and make the boring
very
stuff
hard.
your reality, your everyday reality?
Very hard. But I enjoyed doing it as well. I'm not afraid of contracts. I like working with the team. I knew it was only me who could work on these specific things. There was no one else in the team, so I took the hit. But it was also a natural process because when we made Shadow Tactics, there was a week that I had blocked for evaluating the Unity engine lighting mode we would use for the game. It was a very important task. I was very good at this at that time. It was important because the other departments were depending on the decision, so I had to do it. But when that week started, I received a letter from America telling me that some company we worked with was being sued and that I should be in New York next week. I was like, I don't even understand what's going on. And it meant I was in a dilemma. I had to choose, should I focus on the stuff that only I can do, which was the CEO stuff, the stupid letter, the stupid tech stuff, all that stuff that just you can't plan for. I didn't know that letter was going to come. There's no project management that can deal with that. I think, or do I focus on what is important for the game, which is basically the whole company, because everyone else was working on the game and needed those decisions. And at that point, it wasn't fun to work on the game anymore. And I realized, well, I can kind of outsource within my own team the lighting section of the game, but I cannot outsource those letters that just come up and the problems with everything that just happens. So at that point, it actually felt better to stop coding instead of doing everything at the same time.
That's hard. That's hard. Two more questions, and then we go to answering questions from the public. One thing that came to mind while you were speaking about this, and while we were discussing, basically giving stuff away from what you do to others, I think here an important point is processes. I think especially if you move from one person to three to five to seven to 15 to whatever, I think you need, in this streamlining process, you need processes that are easy to understand and that are, checks and balances as well. Things that are easy for the people to take on once they take on tasks. How did you do that? How did you make sure that you had processes in mind and checks and balances while you were getting the team enlarged, let's say?
So I think there was a short lag. I just waited.
Yeah.
The question I understood was about the processes, how we get them in place. I think, if you grow to 10 or 15 people, if you're good at managing, like from a natural talent, other people, you will build some processes just by instinct. And because you can't do everything on your own. But once you're growing more and more, we got help from a consultant who's also a therapist at the same time and who's usually consulting very large companies. And, it really helped to have, like, when we grew to 20 plus people for the very first time, we needed to have an org chart. So basically a hierarchy, like who are the founders, who's heading which department, and what does that even mean? Like, what does it mean to be a head of art? And we're managing a lot of responsibilities and the actual tasks that every person has. And it's true, these days, everyone who's leading or managing the team, we are very much focused on processes and iterating on them, improving them. And sometimes it's very annoying, and because processes aren't always the most fun. But on the other hand, it's important that, if you have 36 people and someone is getting sick, like, who does that person actually speak to? How is it being part of our project management tool? What's happening with the salary and special cases? You have to work on that kind of stuff. But then again, it only really, I think for us, the breaking point was between 15 and 20 people, somewhere around that size. Before that, we could do a lot of things extremely efficiently and very straightforward and direct connections, which I think only worked because we have such a steady team. If there was more fluctuation, I think we would have failed with that earlier.
Why did it work? I lagged again. So why did it work? Because I think that was relevant.
I think in the end it works by, listening to other people, following their advice, and once you're growing bigger and bigger, you need maybe professional help. But be careful with who you choose. It has to be someone who understands the creative industry, who understands your company. Doesn't help to just have a consultant telling you to make process.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Let me then go to the questions from the public, because it's getting late. You talked about doing work for hire as a temporary means of keeping the lights on while working on original IP. There are also companies that are primarily work for hire but are trying to allocate staff to create original work. Any advice for those companies in developing that original IP?
I
Don't do
personally
it.
think if you want to do original IP, that means you want to do the best quality you can do on that project. And it means you're a certain type of person, which often also means that when you're doing the work for hire, you want to deliver the best project to your partner that's possible. And from my experience, that's not really helpful with doing the original IP, because you have to be kind of cold and very business-like about the contract work, make sure it generates profit, and use that profit to get to the original IP, to have enough time. It just takes a lot of time to create something new. And from my experience, if you are passionate about creating original content, that usually means you are passionate and you want to do the best projects, and that usually means you kind of subtract from your profit from those contract work projects, and at the end you don't have that much left to focus on your own thing. So I don't know how to tackle this. We didn't do it. We chose to do contract work, but only projects that we wanted on our company's CV, on our track record. Projects that were cool enough to have them on our website and that were relevant. And a couple of years, we deleted all of our mobile games and only kept our big projects on the website. But for a long time, we had them online, and we were very proud of them and had fun doing them. So, yeah, maybe
Okay.
come back to me with a personal chat about that, because I think it's very specific to the studio as well.
I'll maybe join Discord for the other questions, because we have to finish at 5 o'clock, if that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, we can do one more question maybe.
What? Yeah, and then on Discord. What is a good metric that shows you aren't doing things in a proper way? For example, you're having way too many delays, deadlines are passed, people don't try to finish ASAP, but accept the delay and just roll with it. It's taking too much time to create something simple. What, in your opinion, is a good time frame to get up to speed with making video games when you have no prior experience?
Those are some of the toughest questions I ever received.
But that's very
If
important, though,
you're,
because most of indie studios have a big problem with deadlines. I think, especially
yes,
while they make their team a perfectly running oiled machine.
yeah. So there are two things that just come to my mind. First of all, if you make a game and it's maybe one of the first games you make, try to build the concept in a scalable way, which means it shouldn't be a purely story focused game that has to be 10 hours long. And if you have to cut something, the whole story will be broken. It should be a game that has, let's say, 20 levels. And if it's just 10 levels, it's still okay. So make it scalable so that you can react to what you learn during the process. that always helps, even for experienced teams, obviously. The other thing, for example, if you look at The Last Tinker, you can do clever things. Usually, platformers have a fire world, an ice world, a jungle world. We just did a red, green, and blue world, which meant we could reuse assets. It was a very simple style, yet very effective. It was still, the different worlds, the red, green, and blue world were very distinctive. So try to think about your strengths, try to find clever ways of how to tackle the problem that things will take longer than expected. And if it's scalable,
Mhm.
that helps. If you can do clever decisions like what I mentioned, for example, that helps. But it's very tough. And then I just want to conclude with, don't forget, it's a marathon. You have to release probably many more games before you are successful. So just don't think about that one single game you will do, and then once that releases and it fails, you go bankrupt. That shouldn't happen. You should be healthy after the release as well.
I think that's a very important lesson to end this off. I would just like to add in terms of what you said. I think meeting deadlines is important, but creating the right deadlines is also hugely important. So making sure that the deadlines that you actually put in place are doable, right, are relevant, are not too lax, but are also not too tight. I think communicating inside your team and making sure that everyone is comfortable with the deadlines is the first and most important point when you discuss any type of deadline. So on that note, Johannes, thank you so much for sharing with us your experience and for the lessons you've given us today. I am going to ask you to please go on Discord because there are a few other questions, and also tonight we have the Altspace VR party. If you can join, although I know you're a recent father, I'm also a recent mother myself, so I know that partying. Thank you so much for everything, Johannes.
Thank you for having me.